I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're diving into a wonderful book. It is called Heartful Business, Leading with the World in Mind by Lorraine Flower and Trudy Worth. This pivotal book serves as a daring blueprint for business leaders around the globe, advocating a seismic shift towards conscious leadership. It underscores the critical role businesses play in addressing global crises and outlines a comprehensive operating system for leadership that embeds the greater good into the very fabric of organizational purpose. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put her in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her wonderful book. The links are below the interview. Lorraine, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
And you, Logan, thank you for having me here.
My pleasure. What inspired your collaboration on Heartful Business?
Well, for over 40 years, I've been part of the business world in various guises and seen the potential that business has to contribute to our world. I can see the damage that we can do through the business route, and I can also see the potential that business leaders and organizations as a whole have. And I couple that with the spiritual journey that I've been on really through all of my life, but particularly in the last 40 years of that life. And so the two just seemed to come together, and it seemed time with what's going on in the world today to maybe put another perspective out there.
What type of issues in the world do you feel business leaders should be cognizant of today?
Well, I think business leaders have a key responsibility. And for me, whenever we speak about leadership, we should also bring in that word responsibility. And I think that responsibility is to reflect on the impacts that they're having within the world. And we've seen many trends really brought about through the way particularly large businesses operate in terms of consumerism, in terms of encouraging people to want things they can't afford, to creating a desire culture in many ways. And I think organizations, I know we need to sell products if we're to survive, but it's about the right products and made available in the right way. We've also seen the damage that organizations can do. Energy companies creating oil spills through negligence and lack of care. That damage the environment, damage our natural homes. So I think businesses have a lot of responsibility and opportunity to improve the way in which we live.
What about those naysayers who say, well, it's hard for us to be responsible here in the West when you go to the East and there's such pollution pouring out of their factories that what we do doesn't matter? What do you say to that?
Well, I think we've been there before. We were the leaders in this race to the bottom on pollution. The fact that we may be starting to see the impacts, I say may because there is lots of evidence that doesn't matter how many summits we have on the subject of climate change and the crisis of climate, that we still don't seem to be able to galvanize ourselves towards actual concerted action. But we are at least raising awareness across the Western hemisphere, the Western regions. I think the fact that the East is starting to make an even bigger contribution to climate change is something that should not stop us in the West from taking our responsibility. See, leadership isn't to me about saying, well, they're doing it, so it's okay for us to do it. I think it's about role modeling, and it's about showing that there is another way to do things. We have technology, we have intelligence, we have creativity, and within that we have responsibility. And all of these things can be used to greater good.
Tell me about conscious leadership and how it differs from traditional leadership models.
Yeah, so conscious leadership, of course, we bring together that word consciousness and leadership. And consciousness at its most basic level, we can talk about in terms of awareness. So what do I pay attention to? What comes onto my radar? What do I think about? What do I give house room to? So that's perhaps the primary level of thinking about consciousness. And if we look at our own everyday thoughts and the things that we read about, the things that we choose to talk about, the things that we give our time to, many of us get wrapped up in all sorts of trivia or even not thinking, non-thinking, if you will. And so for me, consciousness is the first step we can take, is about starting to pay attention to our imprint, however small or however large our imprint is. So we might be in a very local sense within our family or within our community, able to make a little bit of a difference. And we saw some of this happening in COVID, for example, where we, through the lockdown and various other things, obviously, that impacted our way of living, we were able to start to see new threads of relationship, new threads of action, new threads of community spirit coming in. So these are expressions of consciousness. If we take it to a more esoteric level, consciousness is about our connection with soul, with spirit, with meaning, with something that feels bigger than we are. And here we start then to get into a higher description of, or a bigger description of, collective and collaboration and being together. So then we can start to think about humanity as one. One of the themes that we write about in the book is the principle of interconnectedness and recognizing that we are all connected. And so consciousness takes us into that space where we can start to see that the action I take, the things I think about, the things I pay attention to, does actually have an effect on the world around me. Even if I like to say to myself, I'm insignificant. So coming back to the East-West conversation, nothing is insignificant. Nothing. We're all significant in every action we take.
Absolutely. Every plastic bottle you throw in the waste bin, to every minute you let your car idle, you're contributing to the problem when it comes to climate change. I was going to ask you, how do you envision the impact of heartful leadership addressing issues like climate change, economic disparity, and social conflict?
Well, like all of these problems, all of these issues are so large that we could all be forgiven for saying, well, what can I do? Little old me, how can I make a difference? But in fact, that's actually where the difference starts, is if each and every single one of us takes a step forward, multiple steps forward. We've seen it on a very basic level with things like recycling, for example. It's much higher in our consciousness today as a natural act than it was 10 years ago, for example, 15 years ago. So each small action that we take, we can start to contribute to some of these really big issues. We don't have to become out and out activists, with our placards. And although, again, that's a very worthwhile and useful action because it brings attention to things. But we do need to care. And we called it Heartful because it is about caring. It is about paying attention to all the things that matter. And many people, and I'm surrounded by them as friends and family, many people will say, well, look, Lorraine, just living today is enough. It's hard enough to do that, to put food on the table, to look after my children, to make sure there's a roof over our heads, those sorts of things. And of course, that's absolutely right. But every step that we take towards thinking about another person, thinking about the impacts that we're having in the world, thinking about the quality of our thinking. So am I feeling grateful? All of these things, step by step, start to shift things. Now, within all of that, of course, we've still got much bigger systems of power and control. But it's not impossible here either. There are examples of organizations, companies like Danone, for example, who've joined something called the B Corp movement. B Corp is a system and a way of thinking about how have I set my business up? What are the parameters that it's operating to? And it challenges business owners to think about their commitment to going beyond profit. And for me, that's where Heartful Business makes a difference. It's not about not making a profit. It's about profit and And there are so many examples in the world of organizations that have been set up and where the owners or the shareholders are really making sure that they're giving back to society. These are all examples of how heartful business can start to live and how we as individuals can play our part in that shift.
Yep, we're seeing more of that today. We see, organizations that plant a tree for every dollar that they earn in net profits.
Exactly.
And we see dog food companies that are, building shelters for animals and things like that. So corporate responsibility and corporate awareness and global awareness seems to be catching on trend right now, which is great. Tell us about who this book is for and what readers will find when they open up the pages of your book.
We've tried to write the book so that it's for anybody who is in a business, in a leadership position, even if they're not yet in a formal leadership position, but consider themselves somehow in some way to be leaders. So the book is written as plainly as we can do it. Now, you asked me about the phrase conscious leadership. Mm-hmm. We have included quite a lot of spiritual content, spiritual in the sense that it's about principles, it's about values. And it would have been possible to write this book completely from an esoteric perspective. But what we've tried to do is write it in such a way that it is accessible and expressed in a way that anybody can relate some fairly fundamental principles of life, thinking about what does good economy look like? What does it mean to be interdependent? What does it mean to commit ourselves to the greater good? All key solid values and principles. What does that start to look like in how I show up as a leader? So we've expressed those principles in a series of leadership qualities. Those 5 leadership qualities include things like connecting with a sense of purpose. So as a leader, am I clear why I do what I do? Am I clear what it means to show up and have clear intent and to stick to that in a whole way and in an uplifting way that takes others with me? So 5 qualities that leaders can assess themselves against, if you will. And then we speak about 5 different practices that will help leaders to commit this into the day-to-day practice. So leaders can expect something that is holding both a high note of aspiration and higher values, but hopefully presented in a very accessible way with plenty of case studies that show that, just as we were saying earlier, there are examples out there. Are they perfect? No. Are they moving in a better direction? Absolutely. And that's all we can keep asking for, is that we push ourselves towards a better expression of who we are.
Yeah. Great advice, noble goals for sure. It's disheartening at times when you see major corporations that are exporting their sweatshops or exporting their pollution, and on the citizens on the global stage, they seem like they're good citizens, but we know what they're doing behind the scenes, and they need to be outed for that. And I know that work is being done as well. But your book is an absolute great wake-up call for business leaders, future business leaders, and employees too, as to what can be done to change the corporate structure that it's beneficial to the world at large. The name of the book is Heartful Business, Leading with the World in Mind. It is written by Lorraine Flower and Trudy Wirth. It's a pivotal book that serves as a blueprint for business leaders around the globe. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Lorraine.
Thank you very much, Logan. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
My pleasure. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.